Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session on Azure DocumentDB. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the folks joining from different parts of the globe. My name is Noor Basha, Senior Marketing Manager at Winware Technologies, and I'll be a moderator for today's webinar. As most of you know, we are hosting a series of webinars on .NET, Visual Studio, AngularJS, Azure, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. As you can see on the screen, today's topic for the session is Azure DocumentDB, where we will see how you can create or develop solutions using DocumentDB. So before we start, let me highlight a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end. A recording and presentation of this session will be shared to you in next 24 to 48 hours. So with that, let me take this opportunity to introduce you to my colleague, Mr. Sai Shankar. Sai is an Associate Technical Architect at Winware Technologies, and he brings over 14 years of experience in the IT industry and is a Microsoft Azure Certified Specialist. So without wasting time, I would like to turn it over to Sai. Sai, over to you.
Thanks, Noor. Good morning, folks who joined from US, and good evening to others who joined from different parts of the world. My name is Sai Shankar, as Noor explained. I'm an Associate Technical Architect with Winware Technologies. The topic that I'll be covering today is Azure DocumentDB. So we'll be going through Azure DocumentDB, its key capabilities and benefits, and how do you compare Azure SQL versus the document database. We'll go through some basics of DocumentDB, and then we will have a quick demo on how to use DocumentDB through an application, and then how you can see the data that is created on the Azure portal. So before we go into Microsoft Azure DocumentDB, let's understand what DocumentDB is. DocumentDB, although the name suggests it is a document, we are not dealing with a Word, PDF, or Excel document. We are dealing with something, a name-value pair, like a JSON document that is saved in the database. So it is a NoSQL kind of database, and it is built for simplicity, scale, and performance. Since this document is very simple and small, it can be scaled. They scale very well, and you can put them into partitions, and this can be scaled to thousands of nodes. There is no dependency from one node to another node, and don't have any constraints like locking of records, what we have with a traditional database. And they don't have complicated joins. They are structured data, and database do not enforce a schema. Those are the peculiarities of a document database. Now, what is Azure DocumentDB, and what does it offer more than the existing document DBs that are out there? Azure DocumentDB is Microsoft's document database as a service delivered out of Azure. It is fully managed, scalable, queryable, schema-free JSON document database service for modern day applications. So it is a NoSQL JSON database. It also scales very well like other document database. And there is no schema enforced similar to other document databases. But what does it offer extra other than the typical document DBs? They have a flexible query option, where just having a similar SQL syntax, which everybody is familiar with, and then it does a good job of querying the database to fetch the data. There is a index created of every field that is defined in the document, and we can query it to get the particular document. It also gives a flexible storage and throughput. So the pricing is based on 3 levels, S1, S2, and S3. And depending on our application needs, we can select the corresponding plan. It also supports multi-document transaction, wherein if you're writing something to a document and then it is not, you're writing something to multiple documents and then it fails on one document, then it is cancelled on other documents. So it is all or nothing kind of scenario. What are the key capabilities and benefits of using Azure DocumentDB? So it has ad hoc queries that are with familiar SQL syntax. I will show you the syntax of how it looks. And on the server side, it uses JavaScript kind of language. So every programmer, modern day programmers are aware of JavaScript, and they will be able to pick it up very fast. It is fully managed. We don't have to worry about replication and scaling. Everything is taken care of by the Azure framework. And it is open by design in the sense that if you know SQL, JSON, and JavaScript, you're good to go with the database. It is also scalable, and it has a flexible storage, as I mentioned before. Now, how do you compare a relational database like Azure SQL with Azure DocumentDB? So one of the challenges with modern day applications is the schema is keep on, it is iterating. We are not sure what the schema is going to be when we start on a project. So in those kind of scenarios, no schema database is more preferred. So in Azure SQL, you are supposed to know what the schema is upfront, and then it is not receptive to changes in the schema. Whereas in DocumentDB, it gives you the flexibility of changes to the schema. Next thing is about indexing. In Azure SQL, we have indexes defined based on our query needs. So you define different indexes, and the more indexes that you create, it has an impact on the performance of the database. But Azure DocumentDB provides indexing on all the keys that are there on the document, and then we can query on any key and use it. Other thing about modern day applications is when you have a relational database, you have basically 3 layers. One, at the database level you have the schema, and in the application level you have a object relational mapping, which maps the data from database objects to objects in the server side. And then we have a model for the view. We have an object model for the view. So you iterate through these 3 levels to actually perform any operation, database operation. With Azure DocumentDB, all of this comes down to one single model, which is same as what is there in the database. You have that in the application, and then that is used in the UI level also. Next, about the programming language that is used for a user-defined function and stored procedures, you use SQL queries. Whereas here in Azure DocumentDB, you use JavaScript as a language, which the programmer is familiar with. He doesn't have to depend on a DBA to optimize his queries or approach him for logic. He can do all of that by himself since he's aware of JavaScript. Then how does Azure SQL scale compared to DocumentDB? So Typically, Azure SQL can scale up to 500 GB of data, whereas DocumentDB, as I said before, it can scale to petabytes of data because it has this simple nodes which can be replicated to thousands of nodes, and that has very high scalability. So what kind of applications does Azure DocumentDB is preferred? So usually where you manage user-generated content and data, those kind of applications tend to go with Azure DocumentDB. For example, MSN.com uses Azure DocumentDB. Now, this is the typical syntax that we use for a DocumentDB, for Azure DocumentDB. So we are querying from the food table, and the query looks similar to TSQL except that it has a fully qualified food dot in the where class and also in the select class. And the output is natively JSON. So you can use this directly into your application. On the server side, we use JavaScript expressions for user-defined functions and stored procedures. So this is an example of an user-defined function. It is doing a match, input.match with a regular expression. Now, what is the structure of Azure DocumentDB? So first, on Azure portal, we need to create a DocumentDB account within which you have a database. And within the database, you have collections. And collections encompasses the documents. It encompasses the logic that is there for stored procedures, triggers, and user-defined functions. And within documents, you can also have attachments. Although that is not recommended and that is not the best practice, you can still have an attachment over for documents. Each entities are the data that is stored in JSON. They can be addressable by a logical URI, and it is partitioned for scaling out, and it is replicated for high availability. Entities are represented as JSON. We can scale out through addition of collections. So as and when the data increases in your collection, you can scale out to multiple collections, and that is how you scale up. How do we interact with the database? The interaction is with RESTful interaction over HTTP, and it supports both HTTP and TCP connectivity. It also uses HTTP verbs and semantics like post, get, put, patch, and delete. And what are the recommended languages for development? So .NET, Node.js, Java, Python, all of this are supported. It's basically JSON document that you're dealing with and JavaScript type of language. So pretty much anything can be the development environment for it. And for query, you use regular SQL query expressions, and you can also use the .NET link expressions. For server-side logic, we again use JavaScript expression for application logic. Next, we come to the demo of the application. Of this demo, what we're trying to show is how to create a DocumentDB account and how to create a database within Azure. And you can also create the database from an application. You can also create the collections and the documents. So we'll be demoing how to do that. So here we start with the Azure portal. So I'm in the Azure portal. I have a couple of the database accounts created. And we just explore what is there here. So within the my sample DB, I have a database called person database, and within that I have a collection called contacts. And within the contacts collection, I have a couple of documents here, which is referenced by this ID. Now, when you explore this, you can see that it is a JSON document. So this is how it looks on the Azure when you explore it. Now I'll show you how to create a database account, DocumentDB account in Azure. Go to Add New, select Data and Storage, and Azure DocumentDB. Here we give a name of the account. So here we can give. So it just shows a check mark when if it is available, the subscription, what resource group it belongs to, which location it is, and then you say create. So you can see here that it is getting created. It takes about 5 minutes to create the DocumentDB account. For demo purpose, we will use an already created account. And for accessing this database account, we are interested in two things. We are interested in, we go to the keys tab here, and then it opens the URI and the primary key. So URI and primary key is used to connect to the document account. Now we will see how we can access the document account from a application. I'm creating a console application. Say OK. All right. So for this, we need to include in the NuGet package manager. We need to include Microsoft Azure DocumentDB client. So I've been using this, so it comes up. Select the project and say install. So once you install, you need to create a client for accessing the document account. So while we are waiting for this to happen, we will add some references. I've written some code snippets, and this will resolve once we have the installation done. Just give it a couple of one more try. So new project, console application. we'll navigate to the Microsoft Azure DocumentDB client and then say install again. Hopefully this time we'll be lucky. Great. So it's as it gets installed. Right. Great. That is done. We can add our references. So I had some code snippets, so that is bringing up all this code. And we need some endpoints. So we copy this URI from here and put it. I'm sorry, my Visual Studio seems to be crashing for some reason. So what we'll do is we'll open an application that I've already created and then go through the code rather than writing it from the scratch. All right, so I have already copied the endpoint URI and the authorization key here. The references are added here. Here, what we're trying to do is create a client, and then we have the database. This is how you create a database, create database query, and it is checking basically whether the database is created or not. If it is not created, it goes and creates the database. Next, it goes and creates the collection, and here we create a document, and the structure for this document is defined below as the family class, and it has this subclasses here. So here we are going and creating a document, and then we simply query and display the results on the screen. I'm sorry, again it is so with that code, what it does is it connects to the database, and then we'll try to run it before it crashes again. Let's see if we are able to. I'm going to put a breakpoint here before it goes and deletes the database. All right. I'm sorry that I'm not able to present this. What the code basically does, it connects to the database. It goes and create a document. It goes and creates something like this, and then you can see the documents created. All right, that the same code doesn't goes and creates the database. It also creates the collections, and then it adds documents. I wish I could show that to you. For some reason, my Visual Studio is failing me. Now, the last slide that I want to cover is the collection. Most of us tend to look at it as a table in our relational world, but it's not a table in this form or this form. It looks more like a gunny bag with lots of documents in it. The documents can be of any type. It doesn't needn't be of any prescribed format, and it accommodates that. So Noor, if there are any, this is my last slide. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take that.
Hey, thanks, Sai. Thanks for that quick session. I know we were not able to show the full demo, but I'm sure like people would have got a gist of how it works. It's pretty simple and straightforward that I can see from the way you have shown on the mission. But yes, Sai, I have few more questions here. So the first and foremost is, what are the data types supported by DocumentDB?
Yeah, so since DocumentDB is basically we are storing JSON-like objects, right? JSON documents in there. So it supports all the data types that are supported by JSON, like strings, numbers, Boolean, null. It also supports objects and arrays for more complex data types.
Thanks. And since you are on a collection slide, if you could just slightly elaborate on what is a collection and how many collections you can create in a document DB, if you could just slightly elaborate on that.
Okay, so collection is like a container for the documents, right? Like this gunny bag that you see in the screen. Um, it encapsulates the documents. It also is a container for the JavaScript application logic, like user-defined functions and stored procedures. And all the transactions are scoped to a collection. So any application logic that you put in a collection, you cannot run it on another collection. So whatever logic that you write, it is within that collection. And collection can be by default you can have about 100 collections within a database, but on request Microsoft increases that within the same account itself. So the
Okay.
answer is 100 collections within a database by default.
Thanks, Sai. And one more question is, how do I set up users and permissions?
The users can be set up using the DocumentDB SDK, or as I said earlier, through the REST APIs that it provides, the DocumentDB provides. So
Cool.
either through the DocumentDB SDK for the code and or through for the REST APIs.
Great. And what is a request UI?
Okay, a request unit is a unit of measure for measuring. It is like a standardized unit for measuring, how much resources we are using. So it is a single unit of measure that is required to perform a DB operation. And the three different the three different pricing levels that we have, S1, S2, and S3 supports. So the S1 supports about 250 request units, and S2 supports 1000 request units, whereas S3 supports 2500 request units. So based on our application needs, we can select the corresponding level.
Okay. Thanks, Sai. I know we are almost there. Before we wind up, I would like to just highlight on our upcoming webinars. If you could just move to the next slide. I would like to inform you folks, our next webinar is on Entity Framework on March 16th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And also we have another webinar on March 23rd, which is again on Azure IoT Suite. So I hope you folks would join these webinars and would also help us if any of your friends, colleagues are interested in joining these webinars. Again, thanks everyone for taking time to join this webinar session, and I hope you found it informative. Thanks, Sai, and have a good day.
Thanks, folks. Sorry I couldn't demo the application. I had it all working, but sorry we couldn't, get it to work properly in the time.
No problem, Sai. I think that was pretty straightforward. We could see some of the working from your existing sample. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Thanks.